There we go.
Got it.
Welcome back, everybody, to another AMA/community call, depending on what you like to call it. Good turnout today. Hope everybody's doing well. Let us know in the comments where you're calling in from. We got a nice little activity here going before we even hit the record button. We will not be joined by Ben, who had to fly down to Colombia on a short notice with some family issues, and Martin has COVID, although I think he's doing better, and he should be back like tomorrow or something. So you'll probably see them in the near future. We had a lot of questions come in today, which is really cool. Some different questions, I would say, based on compared to what we've had before, which is also really exciting. So Badejo will probably be doing most of the talking, and you missed the last one, so that works. But yeah, feel free to take it away. And guys, as always, if you have questions, we don't have the option for you to unmute yourself or like share your screen and whatnot at this time. We will let you ask questions sort of later on. But if a question sort of pops up in the middle of us talking, just put it in the chat and we can get to it, and we can even unmute you if needed. So with that, over to Badejo.
Cool. All right. Can everyone hear me properly?
From my end, all good.
All right. So these were some questions submitted up front. So I'll try to work through them, and feel free to jump in at any time, Robert, to just flesh things out if I'm going too superficially or too deep. All right. So one question was mainnet launch. This is a familiar question. When is the full release of the project planned to the network? So the sort of range that we're working with right now is Q2 of this year. So that's anywhere from sort of March to June. And I would say the main bottleneck for us for actually launching is the audits on the runtime. I think pretty much, so run is for having auditors review our blockchain. We've already had one blockchain audit, but I think it's appropriate to do another one. And there, if you have any experience building anything in this industry, you will know that it's really, really hard to get access to auditors. They get a lot of business, and it's not easy to train new people and have new firms enter that industry. So that's like the main bottleneck. So we signed with an auditor, I think 7 or 8 months in advance. We signed with another auditor for March. So we have 2 auditing firms just like we have one on backup in case something happens with the other one. And I'm meeting with a third one now on Friday. So like that's the main bottleneck. I think pretty much everything else like Atlas and Pioneer and all the infrastructure stuff, that's good enough where if the blockchain was audited and complete, I would say we could launch like at any time almost, because all those other pieces we can keep developing after the system has launched. So TLDR on that long answer is anywhere from March till June of this year, and the audit timeline is the main bottleneck. We have been exploring ways of launching earlier. So you can launch earlier where you're launching a more locked down version of your blockchain where, and you've probably seen this in Polkadot and a few other chains where they have to go through a certain number of steps to make sure everything's working, and then they unlock more and more features. So that more of a staggered sort of release could also be a way where we would be willing to take maybe a little bit more risk on the blockchain side and say, okay, we can go to market earlier, we can launch, the system can start working in the minimal way, like tokens would be transferable. You could do something, some kind of governance, but not the whole thing. And then we could asynchronously do audits. So we're still working out those details. So you should just go with the interval that I just mentioned until further notice. That makes sense.
I have a quick follow up on that. Yeah, that's a great answer. How much of this is a personal question for me, I guess. Not sure how much value it is for everybody else, but maybe there's some. How much of getting one of these audits is the practical sort of actually trying to find bugs, and how much of it is just getting sort of external approval that like you've done things correctly?
It's definitely a lot more of the latter than I would like, for sure. Okay. So there's one part of it is that people will be confident that the system has a good prospect of actually working. So that's not that's like a real thing because people actually understand that like significant effort has been invested in it working. There's like honestly also just like a psychological kind of thing to it where for the team and me to be comfortable with the work we've done, you feel like you at least need to do the things that you're supposed to do, basically. But audits are notoriously well known for being of, shall we say, unknown value or at sometimes questionable value, because it's really, really hard for even for sophisticated security researchers to find bugs and things at anything like the likelihood of the people who have been engineering and building it. So, we did one audit and that firm had a very difficult time finding bugs. They gave us a lot of credit for how well done the work was. They found sort of one overarching security issue, which we've dealt with, but I'm not sure I would say that it's like a decisive problem that we could have totally disregarded and everything would have been fine.
Right.
So, yeah. So I'd be curious whether people care, like, if people here, when they get into projects, do they actually care whether they're audited? Do they check? Do they read the audit reports that projects put out in order to like get their seal of approval? I'll be curious to know. But yeah, so that's sort of the story on that. Do you care, Robert? Like when you get into a project, you check if they're audited, you read the report?
Because I'm not super techie, I would say that on a surface level, it definitely gives a project another layer of credibility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. There's almost like a credibility from like, well, you were able to spend all this money, so you must be doing something right because it's so damn expensive.
It's like people buying NFTs on OpenSea. It's like, oh, you can afford the gas fees. At least they got, right. They had enough,
Exactly. The last quote I got for the cost was $1,000 an hour for an auditor. So that's US dollars. That's quite a, yeah. So that's like a premium top tier lawyer, basically. That's what you're paying for.
Yeah.
Bustov is pointing out that MonoX has been hacked despite 3 audits. I don't know what MonoX is, but that doesn't surprise me. Right. All right. So I'll jump over to the next one. Founding member allocations. Is it still the case that there will be guaranteed allocations of 0.02% for founding members? Yes, that is still the case. So this week has been crazy for me. Just too much to do. I really, really, really wanted to be able to on this call today basically show you guys like what we've taken. Like there are the founding member scores and the allocations, as you guys probably know, and we're going to convert them into joy allocations for the incentives 3.0 thing that we're rolling out. And I literally have a pie chart on the other, like one of my screens here that shows like how much joy different people are getting in the program, but it's not ready. So I tried my very best. But yes, everyone who was promised 0.02% for being a founding member will definitely get that. Moreover, of course, you'll get tokens as a result of your founding member points on top. And I can say, I guess, anyone who had any amount of founding member points will get some joy allocation as well. And I bet some people are super happy about that. However, there are caveats. So, that doesn't mean literally what it sounds like. But anyone who, if you have 1 founding member points, once this new scheme is launched, you can count that as a certain number of joy tokens. So I think people will be overall happy with the transition that we're making. I think things are going to be a little bit more clear, both in terms of what you're getting and in terms of what it's worth and all these kinds of things. And I wanted to have that done today, but I couldn't because there's just too much to do. So maybe tomorrow or the day after, I can announce that and you'll all have some specific concrete knowledge about exactly what your allocation is. And by the way, of course, you'll be able to get more. This is not the end of the story. Cool. Let's see. Ideal user. Who do you think is your ideal user? Describe him. Well, I mean, this was a little bit hard to know exactly what that means, whether that's like on the test net, whether it's the founding member program, whether it's on after mainnet, whether it's the creator site. So it's a little bit hard. So I could try to fill in a few different variations of that. So certainly like the mantra that we keep repeating for before launch and for founding member for the founding member status is you have to be a high quality contributor. So that means you can identify problems, you can describe what you need to solve them, get the resources. That means the money, the people, the time together, and actually deliver a solution. And you can do that consistently over time. And that's high, that is high value, right? So that can mean anything from how to get more people in the community, to how to explain stuff to the people in the community, to solving technical problems, to, you know, all sorts of issues. So that's like the ideal user right now on the founding member and DAO contributor side. Then post-launch, certainly that would also be an ideal person to actually be involved and to attract. On the creator side, I think the ideal user would be someone who has a small audience of passionate people who love what they do. So definitely not like Logan Paul with 100 million people. That's like the antithesis of what we're looking for. We're looking for someone with a small, passionate audience who really care about what they're doing, and where the NFT tools and social token tools that we're offering is going to allow them to grow and incentivize and monetize that small base of consumers in a way which, you know, advertising and these sorts of things typically don't, or even something like Patreon, where it's like a transactional relationship. So that would be like the ideal creator. I think those two groups are the primary groups we're thinking about in the near term. And then a little bit longer, the ideal user, ideal person to get in would probably be like a developer who's looking to build different kinds of products on top of the system. So we have Atlas now, which is the main thing people know about, but this is a permissionless system where it's really easy for you to bring new things to the market. So that would be the ideal third kind of persona. Am I missing something there? Maybe.
Well, you could technically look at investors as a user, but
I see what you mean.
less so. I would say.
Yeah.
You could argue that they have value in the sense that, let's say people are into trading crypto, start making videos about Joystream, and that becomes a way for people to find out about the project. That would be a fourth user, but that would certainly be the last one on the list. But yeah, so that would be it.
For sure. That's also useful. No doubt about that. All right. Next one, marketing points. Marketing like tweets used to not count for the founding member points. Has that changed now that you're more marketing focused? So literally, if I'm going to guess, it probably hasn't. Because basically what you're asking is, does Ben now care about this? Will he give you more credit? And I don't think he will. Now, another thing that's going to happen is, as part of Giza, we're going to have a new working group called the Marketing Working Group, which is literally people who are tasked with spreading the word, evangelizing, getting new people through the door of the Joystream DAO. And they will be important both during this pre-mainnet, but also, of course, during post-mainnet, because marketing is an activity that any organization has to do. So while participating in that group, you will, of course, earn both TJoy, so cash, but you'll also, and I don't want to get too deeply into how the new incentive system will work. If you've read the issue, you will already know, but basically you will also earn joy allocation as a function of earning TJoy. So that means that's a way you can, in fact, earn joy, which is the native asset for those who don't know, by being involved in marketing stuff. But that won't just be like random things that you come up with. It will be within the structure of that group, and they have certain longer run objectives they're trying to get to. I think you just tweeting on your own is unlikely. I don't see any obvious way that would, in the new system, sort of get you any credit. I'm actually not sure. Would that actually, from your point of view, Robert, as a marketer, do you think that could work? Because the immediate thing I think about is, can you have people just tweeting randomly and get credit for that? Will that work? Actually, I'm not sure whether they mean from the official Joystream account or from their own account, because that sort of matters.
I don't think they're thinking in terms of from the Joystream account. And so if we're thinking in terms of people using, like, let's say their own account, I could certainly see people like sitting down and thinking about ways to, like, there is nothing that really stops anyone from doing a cash giveaway and making some type of contest that has some type of mechanism which brings attention to the project, right? They wouldn't technically have to like get permission or do anything of that nature. So in a sense, I could see there being value in somebody sort of taking the initiative to do marketing activities on their own. What we do see mostly though, like if I go to our Twitter and like look at what happens, it's people just doing like 1 out of 10 quality type of stuff, and that's just right. With no followers. So like there's just no value in that. Like if you were gonna do 1,000 pieces of content that were 1 out of 10 quality, just make one piece of content instead, which is 10 out of 10. That will take you so much further than just spewing out sort of random stuff that really doesn't have sort of a ton of value.
We have Alexei raising his hand. Oh, actually,
it looks like it might have been a mistake.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I mean, if someone did something on Twitter which clearly was very innovative and got a bunch of attention, then I guess maybe Ben probably would have given you credit if it was like just very obvious that it did succeed. I'm always concerned about rewarding that kind of stuff because it's just very gameable. Would you be concerned about that? Where people just
I think what I just spoke on, like the sort of low level attempts, I think would just amplify possibly, unless there were sort of rules in play that set the bar at a certain level.
Do you have any? I mean, we haven't talked about this, but do you have any? Have you had any time to think about what kind of stuff the marketing group can do? I'm throwing you a curveball here, but I think you've been aware that there is going to be this marketing working group and people are going to be hired. And, the builders group has been very successful, actually led by L1 Dev. So something equivalent to that in the marketing. I'm not sure who the lead will be, actually. I'm not sure. Is there an obvious candidate?
I'm not sure about who would be the obvious candidate. As far as what they could do, I mean, one of the obvious places to start, it would be content marketing specifically. And I've sort of touched on this before, and I think even sort of gotten started on the standard operating procedures for it. But when we make content like we are doing now, there's a lot of work. There's a lot of work that goes into chopping that up into like video clips and tweets. And so having that being a community-driven thing, we could actually, I think, milk the content for more sort of tweets and potential blog posts. Like again, an example is this idea of, or this term runtime comes up a lot. Guys like me don't necessarily know what that means. That could be a blog post. Somebody in the community could write a blog post about that. The marketing team doesn't necessarily have like the resources to address every single one of those, but as a community, we could probably crank out like a lot more there. But again, you would have to set the bar at a certain level, so you're not just getting this like subpar sort of submissions. But that would be an obvious one. And then I would have to probably think more, but obviously content marketing is one pillar of marketing, but that would be an obvious one where you can involve the community in a way where it's like pretty likely to be sort of productive and be on brand and like all these things.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Cool. All right. So that goes to the marketing points. Deserved status. How confident are you? Is my thing updating? Yeah. How confident are you that people who are in and who will/won't be in founding members deserve this position? What are your metrics in evaluating and even leave another deserving person from being a founding member? If so, what measures have you or consider? So I guess basically the person saying, how do you know that you're not leaving a bunch of good people out or letting a bunch of bad people in? And so how confident I am? I'm pretty confident that we are keeping subpar people out. That's why we have so few founding members. It is not, I don't think there's any other ambassador program or anything like that, which makes it as difficult to get that status as our founding member program by far. Of course, we could be doing the opposite mistake of not allowing quality people to get in. And I assume anyone who is not will be inclined to say that that's the case. That's a hard nut to crack, though. Do we have any metrics in evaluating? What I have seen is that when you look at people's contribution, some people are contributing over a very long period of time, which would make you think that, and they're not becoming founding members, which would make you think that, hey, maybe we're doing something wrong here. Maybe the person is misunderstood or something like that. Now, a lot of this is Ben, so I can't sort of pontificate too much about it, but I do think there have been sort of long-running, consistent misunderstandings about what we're looking for, which probably comes from both us being different and communicating too little about what we want. Like, because I think the most concrete thing you can find about what we want is like this bullet point listing on the getting started page, or is it on the founding member page on the website? So it's like, other than that, you're gonna have to dig pretty deeply in order to figure out how to do the right stuff. So I think there's just an information problem there, where some people unfortunately have been very active for many, many months and not gained founding member status. I won't name them, but I think some people will recognize themselves in that category. But then you have some people who very, very quickly are able to, in relative terms, able to do it. And I don't know what the difference is, to be honest with you. So some people are just very clued in. Maybe they just spend a lot more time. I don't actually know. But that makes me think maybe there are some people we are leaving out who should actually have been in. Yeah, I don't know. Have you thought anything about this, about whether there are too many people who actually should be in? And, ultimately it does depend on Ben's subjective evaluation, and maybe he gets in a certain mode with a person and then like he thinks of them in a certain way. I mean, he's only human. So
yeah, well, I don't know if I've thought about it in terms of that, but just, I guess, observing Ben and sort of the way that he speaks about it, it just literally comes down to like the quality of the contributions that you make. So if you contribute for 12 months, but again, it's like sort of subpar contributions, it's not a volume thing that we're looking for. Like, that's not it. Like, there are people that have become founding members in a month. Like, they just probably just come in and like sink their teeth into it and find some some high value thing that is actually valuable. And I don't even have a specific name in mind, but just in general, I see, again, Twitter is a good example. When somebody just goes and like finds some random image and puts a Joystream logo on it, like no context, no nothing there. We appreciate the effort, but there is no value in that. Like, again, it would be better if you sort of sat back and like tried to think about, what could I do that actually had a chance of having some kind of contribution value, in terms of like, maybe this helps somebody find out about the project, or maybe this helps somebody upload a video or get involved. Like, there's got to be some type of value at the end of the day. And again, I'm not Ben, but based on the way that he's spoken about it, that just seems to be the case. Like, he looks at the submissions, and we are going away from that, but up until this point, that's how he seems to value it. It's like, it's not really a volume thing or how long you're involved. It's just about what's the end value that you're actually bringing to the table.
Yeah, I think he's also very confident about his conclusion. Like, from his point of view, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to say this in public, but I think he believes that there's this unfortunate, quite sparse set of people who are close to becoming founding members. So he said, like, I think we have a little bit of a problem. There's like too few people who are close, which basically means, in his judgment, that most of the people who are active are actually quite far away. And so he's certainly quite sure from his point of view. I think one thing that can help, though, is as part of Giza, we're doing a lot of things, but one of the things we're doing is creating a human resources working group, which is basically like the recruiting department and greeting department of the DAO. So the people are supposed to grow the DAO's internal capacity to do things. And I think they are going to be quite key in supporting, sort of in a one-to-one kind of a way, people to understand where they should go, how their skills align with the DAO in a way which today you would have to be kind of proactive to discover and figure out. Obviously, participating in that new working group is also a major opportunity for all sorts of people. It doesn't require to have like a lot of technical skills. It's more about being an organized and sort of proactive person. So that's an opportunity in of itself. But more those people can, in a way that we in JS Genesis just don't have the capacity to do, go to person XYZ and say, hey, I can tell you've been here for a while. What do you think? What are your skill sets? Why do you think you haven't gone any further? So I think that can help with nudging people along down the right path. So hopefully that will reduce any sort of false negative status that we currently are generating for people. Yeah. So conclusion, I think our actual founding members are very high quality. I think there is a risk that we are leaving people out who are also high quality because of our information and our processes. That's what I would say as a conclusion to that.
Yeah, and there was a question here. Did you give some kind of advice about, what type of person you would like to get to founding members? Is how he wrote it. I'm assuming you're asking sort of what are we looking for, and I mean I'll give my sense on that. It's just, yeah, this was what Bedeo just touched on. There hasn't been a ton of information, and this really has been like my main project since I joined Joystream is the onboarding experience, where like as I spoke to some of you founding members when I first sort of started working with Joystream, and the number one thing that I found as it relates to becoming a founding member was that people just didn't have clarity around like, what should I do? And I was like, okay, well, this is the number one problem as far as that. Well, there was also the lack of awareness of like how big of an opportunity it is from a standpoint of, getting a lot of tokens.
Right.
So those two combined. So we're fixing that. So like, I'm not going to pull it up right now, but like the onboarding experience is tackling the one problem of like getting people to realize how big of an opportunity the founding members program is, and getting you clear around what is it that I should be doing, who should I be talking to. Like one of the big parts of the onboarding experience is to actually like go into Discord and talk to what we call an integrator. This is somebody who gets a newcomer to talk to a person and be like, hey, this is what I do. What should I focus on? What should I do? They can literally answer your questions and like get you involved. And there is another question here in the chat. Like, I've been running a validator node since Feb 2021. Should I still, like, these kinds of questions, which I don't have the answer to, these people should be able to assist with and actually sort of help push people along, because I understand it's also like frustrating probably from, if you are on the other side of the table trying to become a founding member, there's a lot of sort of question marks. Like, is what I'm doing actually getting me closer? I don't know, because I don't have the feedback. I might just have the feedback that I submitted a report and I didn't get any points, or I got X amount of points, but I don't know which activity actually led to those points and whatnot. So we're in the middle of sort of clearing all of this up, and it should be live, hoping before the end of the month, but maybe Feb.
There's another part of this I want to mention, which, and I'll explain this more in detail when the new incentive scheme comes out, but this question of what's valuable will actually be answered in a much more concrete way now in the new scheme than it was before. So I can briefly explain it because it's very concrete, and then you'll see how that answers the question. So the way it's going to work in Incentives 3.0 is that for every council period, there is going to be obviously a TJoy budget, so a certain number of dollars, like let's say, I don't know, $5,000, just a random number. Don't quote me on that. And anyone who's in the DAO obviously can earn TJoy for all sorts of things. So being a validator like Kakashi, or being a curator or a council member, or running the HR working group, or being in the marketing working group, or all these different roles, you can get TJoy. And basically the way Joy, so the native asset, the tokens are going to be distributed from this point on, is to say, okay, in this council period, let's say the budget was $5,000. And let's say you, for whatever you did, maybe you're in the council or something, and you earned $50. Okay. Now, $50 makes up 1% of $5,000, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so let's say my math is correct with that. So that means you earned 1% of all the revenue or all the cost actually in the DAO for this council period. So 1%. And we will at the same time for the council period have a joy budget. So a certain number of tokens, native tokens you can earn. So let's say 1% of the Subgenesis supply, for example, is up for grabs for that council period. And so you will, as that council member, earn 1% of that budget. So you'd earn 1% of 1%. And that's the actual number of joy that you would be getting in your account. Now I'll explain this with an example to make the sort of make it a little bit more concrete. But that basically means the more T-Joy you earn in a testnet, the more joy you earn. And so that means you should really be trying to get to the highest paid role in the DAO that you're qualified to do, which also makes sense because we want to attract the most skilled and sort of highest opportunity cost members to the roles which are most urgently needed for the testnet to work well. So if you can earn a lot of joy because you're actually doing something where the reward is quite high, that will directly translate into how much joy that you earn. So if you didn't understand all the steps of that example, I'm going to make another video about it. But the end of the day is that it's going to basically become a signal to you, a price signal if you want to, about where you ought to go with your scarce capacity in the DAO in order to make the most, what is most valuable. In effect, the wages will tell you that. So we will get more clarity, not only in the information and the onboarding and support, the way Robert is talking about, but in the literal compensation scheme, it will be more transparent what is going to be most giving you greatest return on investment as well. So that is not a scheme without its own issues, but I think it's a step in the right direction. So I think we beat this one to death. I'll go to the next one. Should we? Yeah, thanks. You're welcome, Kakashi. Creator payout. I really look forward to seeing creator programs and therefore tokens. Will DAO mechanism of Joystream even decide how those tokens might be monetized? Right? Creators will have representativeness on DAO mechanism. So there'll I interpret this question as about being like, how do creators get money? How is it decided how much money they get? That kind of a thing. So let me try to go through here. So will DAO mechanism of joy even decide how those tokens might be monetized? So the DAO will decide how much each channel earns over a given period of time. So that's an issue. That's a feature that we haven't really explained or talked about. It is actually in the runtime in the blockchain. Sorry, that is going to be launched as part of Olympia. This native feature will be there. So the council will be able to say, we hereby pay XYZ person this much, this much, this much, and that much, in the same sort of way that YouTube says, we hereby pay, this person, this channel this much, and this person that much. So there will be a way for the council to give a revenue share to all creators. So that means the council has to vote on a proposal with that distribution of payments. So that is coming, and the technical side of that has been done. That has not been integrated into Atlas. That has not been designed how that will work. The big challenge therefore is just as a technical side note, how do you pay, thousands or millions of creators? That's something that's not that easy to do in a blockchain. So that was sort of the difficulty there, but that has been solved. And so the way they decide that, ultimately, that's actually a policy question. That's not a technical issue where I can pontificate about that now. Ultimately, I think it will be some mix of some creators maybe have some kind of a deal, or they have some kind of standing, or they have some sort of potential where they have sort of been given a promise that if they do such things, they're going to get a certain reward. Some portion of the payment, certainly, I can imagine, will be based on how much of their content is consumed, without unpacking how the council would know that, because that's a separate technical issue. that they would need some transparency into. But yes, so the DAO will be able to pay creators in Joy. And by the way, that revenue is split with whoever holds a token for the creator. So if you hold the social tokens, then you will get a share of that revenue. Creators will also have representativeness on DAO mechanism. There is no explicit way that they will have that built in. So they're just like any other token holder. So if a creator has some Joy, they will be able to vote and use it to stake and be in the council or whatever, but there's no special governance mode for creators. They're just like anyone else. Cool. All right. Was that clear?
Yep.
All right.
The question wasn't very clear, but your answer was.
Yeah. I tried to work out a kind of interesting answer there. Okay, evolution. What should be the key goals for Joystream to be self-evolving DAO? What should be the key for it to be self-evolving? I mean, the key to be self-evolving is that you have the right people there, right? To be self-evolving, you have to have the people who have an opinion about where it should go, and they have the ability to organize the effort to have it go there. So that's, you need to have runtime developers who can suggest changes. You need to have product people. You need to have all sorts of people who have an opinion about where to go, and other people who can bring them together like under one coherent vision about like what's the end goal. And that's going to change over time, of course. So I think high quality people married with the sort of self-upgrading feature of the blockchain, which we have. I'm not sure, maybe everyone doesn't know this, but most blockchains will require you to get everyone amongst your validators to opt into the changes that you want to do at any given time. And if people disagree, then you'll get a fork, and then you'll have Joystream and Joystream Classic, and it gets messy, and exchanges and everything goes straight to hell in a handbasket. Now, in the Joystream blockchain, because it is using the substrate blockchain framework, it can actually vote. It can update its own runtime. So there's that word again. So its own business logic can actually be updated using its own rules. And in our case, it would be the council who would do that. So that ability to do that, I think, is quite key. But we already have that. So those technical prerequisites are there. So then I think it's mainly the human side, having people who have an opinion about where Joystream should go and have the ability to work together to have it to go there. So that's no differently to any other organization. Now, where ought they want it to go? That's another question. I'm not sure how much I should say about that. I have my own ideas about, it being a developer platform and enabling creators being quite key. And I assume by saying that, we're sort of selecting for people who agree with that. But ultimately, something may start out as one thing and end up as another. I'm sure if you take YouTube as a reference point, it started out as one thing, and then they probably didn't have what it is today in mind. Maybe Amazon is a better example. I don't know. Yeah. What do you think, Robert?
I think I would add also the system side of things, right? Because as a DAO, you have to be able to organize people in a way where, people can just come off the street effectively, jump in. And how do you, like Tomato was explaining to me, there's this mechanism, right? Of like, if you're in a working group, it'll still be a working group post mainnet, right? Yeah. That, in order to work, you have to stake some amount, right? And this is like a really smart way to like prevent malicious people, right? So there's these little mechanisms, probably like all over the place, that can go from turning it into like an easy thing to exploit, and then you just add this little mechanism, and then all of a sudden you sort of get rid of all those people with malicious intent, and it becomes a thing that can sort of manage and organize and evolve on its own. So I think those two building blocks, like having the right system set up and then the right people, which is probably going to be almost like a product of those systems, they'll sort of filter people out. That's going to be the key. And just on a personal note, it's exciting to sort of watch how DAOs become a thing and have to deal with all these things and put all those mechanisms in place and actually end up in a place where that is all running and functioning and working, because it's kind of, still a pretty new concept. I mean, in the grand scheme of things. So
I totally agree. I think we'll actually on the last question we can revisit this, and I can say a little bit more about our DAO and what it actually allows us to do, because I think it's quite unique and quite different to a lot of other stuff out there, which makes me optimistic. Okay, white paper. Will there be new updated Joystream white paper? The current manifesto kind of serves the purpose of outlining the project motivation, but it doesn't go over the technology side of things. Correct. Maybe people didn't even know this. There was a white paper back in the old ancient times. That was a good sort of very high level, actually it was very detailed, and it was therefore wrong in all sorts of ways, which is one of the reasons not to have it out there. But it was a way for us to get started. I think we have two things that are sort of replacing the role of a white paper right now. We have something called the Joystream handbook, which we haven't really advertised because it's super technical for most people. Like if you want to like build your own Joystream, you could read it. Or if you wanted to like hack Joystream, maybe you can read it, but it's like very, very, very low level. And then we have something called the testnet handbook, which is more like explaining how different things fit together and what different people are supposed to do and so on. So I think those together, we should probably give them more emphasis when they're a little bit more mature, but they're much better than a white paper because they're about what actually is there. It's not just hypothetical stuff. I think once we're ready to go live, rather than a white paper, because I see that as about being about the future, we could have something, I think people call it a light paper. This term is probably not like standardized, but it often seems to be maybe this little bit of a high level description of stuff that sort of is already working. It's not about like, maybe we'll build this. So maybe that could be something that makes sense, but just the standard sort of white paper, I don't know, but I'm open to suggestions. If people think that we really do need like a 30-page PDF in LaTeX and to get people to see the vision, I'm happy to try to put something together at a later stage. So I don't know. So we have something better. No white paper has been planned, but I'm open to reevaluating if people give me a signal that it's really pivotal. I'm seeing some stuff in the chat. Is that something we should address, Robert, or is that just
it's a good question actually. So I can summarize it for you. The question is basically, is there a mechanism in place to prevent sort of whales within the DAO to accumulate a lot of joy token and be able to, let's say, hostile takeover or just come in and run the show? And he's it leads with saying, is, the allocation that founding members are getting, is that too small with regards to that? I don't think that's the case, that it's too small. The other side of the question is interesting. Is there a mechanism in place or whatever to prevent, whales from running the show?
Well, I think maybe the continuous issuance of new tokens for work is probably the biggest. I mean, you could just subvert the whole governance hierarchy to not do anything sensible and just issue you yourself tokens. If you just try to take over the whole thing, I think you would be cannibalizing the sort of value of the whole thing over time. But I'm not going to say that's absolutely theoretically impossible 100%. But the dynamics in the system are very much that you need to issue tokens to pay for what you can tell is going to be quite a substantial organization. So anyone who's just sitting there and not doing anything and not staking and not being involved in anything, they maybe do fine. But, people who are actively involved will have an incentive, which is counterbalancing that. So if you just sit there over time, you will be diluted basically, because everyone else's wages and rewards and creator coins and so on are being diluted. Now, of course, there's the counteracting effect of, burning tokens for all sorts of things that capture value in the system. But that's a net positive for everyone. That's not just for the people who have a lot of tokens, right? That's pro rata benefit for everyone. So, yeah.
On the
So I
voting
think,
side too, though, isn't it like one person, one vote? It doesn't matter how much tokens you hold,
well,
right? Like
no,
you.
well, on the council, yes, but not voting for council members, right? So that's
Okay.
important to distinguish. So for
Right.
voting on council members, there's no, like, there isn't anything in the blockchain which says like, this is a real person and this other account is not the same. Like, these two accounts are definitely not Robert. There's nothing that can prevent us from having two people have the same account, so to speak. Actually, you can't do that in the council either, but at least there are two. It's not based on tokens. So yeah, I think the honest answer here is no one knows. I think it's in the interest of anyone who has a big share to make sure that the system sort of makes sense over the long term, and just trying to issue yourself as many tokens as possible. I'm not sure I've actually seen that as something that people do in these systems. There are other systems that have some amount of governance where I definitely haven't seen it so far. But again, you can't rule it out. And there is this countervailing force of paying for things. So that's the best way to answer that question. Maybe that's not a satisfactory answer to the Buistov, but that is the answer. Claudius is saying a white paper makes sense from investors' perspective, and similar to the audit. Potential investors are used to having a single document to read through when evaluating a project. Don't think it needs to be technical at all, though. It could just focus on how a platform works at a high level, how DAO works, tokenomics. I think linked to the handbook. So maybe more like a light paper, like you said. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, maybe that would be would make sense to do. I'm not sure what the ideal timing is for something like that. I suppose like right now, my main audience is not that. Our main audience is the people on this call who are active. But maybe they also would love. Maybe we should do some kind of a vote, Robert. Should there be?
I find usually whenever you ask people, should we do this? The answer is usually like, yes, we need that.
Okay, so
yes,
yes. It's a good point. Yes, because it's for free. So maybe you should
because we have to do the work and the voters don't.
Okay. So maybe compare it to some other initiatives that we know are interesting. But that's a fair point.
Yeah, but I mean, if the token was live, I could see the value a lot more. Perhaps if we're talking about other investors.
Okay. Cool. All right. Second to last question, main office. So when I read this, I was actually kind of like, well, no, there's no main office. But actually, all right, let me read it first. Do video platforms properly have a main office? Will Joystream have a main office when it becomes something large, do you think? So obviously, I mean, you don't have to have a main office, nor do you have to have a main office as a company for that matter. Like, so JS Genesis, in no practical sense, has a main office. It is an organization, is incorporated in a country, in a jurisdiction, has a bank account, blah, blah, blah. But all the people are all over the world. We're not in one main office. Like, I sometimes meet Martin in one office. So to that extent, we have a main office. So, but will Joystream have a main office? That is not impossible. Maybe it would be really weird. I've never heard of that, of a DAO ending up saying, hey, we need to co-locate these XYZ super valuable people so they can meet in a room and, like, I don't know, make content or strategize. And so we will have a main office. It's not impossible. I see that more as like maybe a company is coming to the DAO and saying, we can provide a service to you, and they have a main office. And then maybe they get like a huge bounty or a spending proposal for like millions of dollars. Does that count as Joystream having a main office? I'm not sure. Certainly, Joystream as a DAO can't own an office because you can't enter into a lease or own real estate as a DAO. So in that sense, we can't.
For now, I'm sure that'll come.
Yeah, maybe that will come. Yeah, in like, is it Wyoming or I don't know where? Some of these jurisdictions are trying to open up for DAOs, but yeah.
Yeah.
Tomato saying a DAO doesn't need an office, in my opinion. Yeah, you're probably right about that. Last question. Other DAOs. What are the most interesting DAO projects that are currently developing that you are following? What do they have, but you don't? And would you like to adopt it? So I had to think about it. It was actually really hard to think of other DAOs where I feel like what they are doing as a DAO is very interesting on an organization level. That might sound super arrogant, so forgive me for that. But most DAOs I'm seeing are basically, and people promote it as this, basically a Discord with a bank account. And you could do things with that. You could, raise money to buy the Constitution, like all these things that people are doing, which are kind of a little bit memey, but like organizationally, maybe the most interesting thing they're doing is that they're bringing to people across borders together and pooling capital. And that's something definitely in a way that's kind of very lightweight and flexible. But when I think of like organizationally, like innovating on organizational structures, there I think we're quite ahead of anything I've ever seen. So a lot of you see these reports coming out and like people talking about what DAOs will be like, and they will like hypothesize about how DAOs will have this or that feature. And like when you compare to Joystream, we already have all of them, and we've had them maybe for like a year or something. So like working groups and like bounties and a council and like all the stuff that goes beyond all the token holders voting on every proposal. We've had that for a long time. We just haven't been on mainnet. So I think as a DAO organizationally, we're doing all the most interesting stuff I can think of. The only other DAO I find really interesting as a DAO is the Aragon Court, if anyone's heard of that. So the reason I think they're interesting is that they're sort of a service provider DAO where they're trying to provide certain services that individual DAOs can't sort of get on their own. So they want sort of be like a court or an arbitration system for DAOs to provide various forms of protection or legal services that DAOs internally cannot provide on their own. And so I think if you've been in the space for a while, you probably will be aware of Aragon. They started in 2017. They built the Aragon framework, which is like very popular on Ethereum. And I think they've launched their court, which means that you can plug into their network. And then if there's any kind of problem in your DAO, you can sort of escalate the dispute out of your own DAO into that DAO. And the hypothesis is that the Aragon DAO, their sort of business model is to provide impartial, accurate judgments about the problems that other DAOs are facing, sort of like a court, basically. And so they can help you to solve problems that just internally within your own organization, you would have a hard time incentivizing. So I think that's very interesting. I'm bummed that they haven't been more adopted, but that's the most interesting other DAO I've found and seen. Otherwise, I feel like people are still using a lot of off the shelf tools. And so they're kind of constrained to some pretty basic things when it comes to being in a DAO. Whilst, I mean, we have an on-chain forum, we have an on-chain proposal system with discussions. I mean, most DAOs don't even have binding voting, as far as I know. They can't even do voting. They have to do it in some off-chain thing, and then the team has to do. They have to be like an intermediary, which says we now honor the voting that the people did in some other environment, which is more gas efficient, and therefore we will now put it on chain and blah blah blah. So, yeah. So I think we're miles ahead. People are doing interesting things. It's going to get more interesting, but it's really hard to innovate. It's very expensive to do anything, and you have the audits and like so. Unfortunately, it's not so easy for people to make these systems as you would have hoped. So that's my somewhat arrogant answer to other DAOs. I'm not sure. You've maybe looked into a little bit, Robert? I'm not sure if you've researched a bunch about other DAOs. Have you found anything that?
Pretty surface level, but yeah, it seems the latest trend is just like, let's organize a group of people to buy some weird thing, like after those Constitution guys. And I'm just, as a marketer, I find it fascinating that somebody will do something and then literally everybody else in that industry will do something with a twist of that original thing. So the white paper question came up earlier, right? It is like, guys, I've been in many other industries. Like, it is not common for a business to have a white paper. It is a crypto thing. And like maybe like older software companies did it, but white papers are not usually like a thing that companies do. Roadmap is like, these are not bad things. They're cool, right? But it's funny how like all crypto projects do them. And I also laugh at the NFT space. I'm like, you have, let's say, Bored Apes. And like now there's this obsession with monkeys or just animals and 10,000 computer generated, like not 9,000, not 11,000, 10,000 because of like this one project. So now everybody's just the blind following the blind.
Yeah.
I think it's just funny.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of that happening now with the DAOs buying golf courses and Blockbuster.
Was it Blockbuster? Yeah.
Yeah, all kinds of things.
Yeah.
So
we're not doing that. I think we're very different. Also, we're trying to what our DAO does is very different. Like we're not just trying to buy something. We're running this whole crazy platform. So it's very different, which is good. Maybe people will imitate us. You know, doesn't sound unlikely. All right, that's the last question I had. We've been going for an hour now, which I think is more than the allocation. So, what do you think? People
yeah, very
feel free to
very
ask
good.
any questions in the chat. Otherwise, we can sign off.
Yeah, guys, if you have questions, throw them in the chat right now. Otherwise, I think this was very informative. Oh yeah, as we wrap up, then again, throw your questions in the chat because we'll be wrapping up in a couple of minutes. But we'd be happy to answer anything that comes up. We did give a little incentive for these questions. So was there a question here that you found a little bit more thought-provoking or perhaps interesting?
You asking me now?
Yes.
Which one?
If not, we can figure this out after. But
let's see here. I mean, this is a good question, I think.
Okay.
Let's see here. I think I'm going to go with this one.
Okay.
I like this question.
Done.
It's a hard question. What does that mean? What does this person get now?
They get $50 worth of T-Joy.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, congratulations to wherever you were. Oh, there was another question from which I didn't add here about what's the story behind Joystream's obsession with ancient civilizations, Babylon, Egypt, Assyria, Roman Empire. It really goes back to this idea that Joystream is to a significant extent an experiment in governance and organization and coordination of people and resources. And so there's definitely a political dimension to that. And so we're going back through time, picking cities which had some, I mean, I'm not sure whether we stuck with it, but cities which had some significance in political history. So maybe they were a known empire, or they innovated on some kind of governance system, or they may not be all good. They may be emperors and all sorts of things that maybe aren't considered that great today. But anyway, all these cities which had some significant role in the evolution of human organization in these governance bodies, I think is sort of the motivation. I think we at some point just started picking ancient cities. In the beginning, we were very careful about, like, we would debate like, what is a city? What did it happen? What order should we have them? And so on. And then it just became an ancient city kind of a thing. And I won't say that we're super attentive to that at this point.
That was the same with Apple operating systems. They were just naming it after like cats or whatever. And then whatever they started with, it just, I don't know, they had to broaden the horizons a bit because they were like running out of animals or something.
There you go.
There we go. Fantastic. I think that's a great note to end on. I think it was pretty substantial today as far as ground covered. So yeah, I don't know if you have anything else to add, but I hope, but huge thanks from my end. Thanks for joining, everybody. And
thanks to everyone. Thank you to you, Robert. Look out for the information on the points and the tokenomics and everything is going to be coming out soon. So take care.
All right, everyone. See you guys. 2 weeks. Bye. We'll be back on. Ciao.